Today, the former president, Jacob Zuma, suffering another legal blow. The High Court in Umsunduzi, the Pietermaritzburg High Court, dismissing his application to prosecute the News 24 journalist Karyn Maughan and the NPA's prosecutor, Billy Downer. Zuma accused Downer of leaking his private medical records to Maughan. The pair filed applications to have the matter setting aside, saying court processes were being abused. The legal team of the former president claims he suffered personal harm and injury because of what they say was an illegal leak. Meanwhile, the Jacob Zuma Foundation slamming the ruling. They say they will urgently appeal it.
This has got absolutely nothing to do with media freedom. If this information was given to media at the right time, when it was already filed in court, there would be no issue. We can't have certain people that are going to get privileged information under the guise of media freedom. This is just a barbaric. You can't have a situation like this. So indeed, this is going to be appealed on an urgent basis because it's riddled with errors in law and all of that. But lawyers will put papers and argue specifically what the issues are.
Assistant editor at News 24, Peter du Toit, welcoming the court's decision, he says, is a big victory for media freedom.
But as far as the order is concerned, I think it's very clear that the court saw this attempt by the former president to privately prosecute a state advocate as well as a journalist as frivolous. So we are very happy. I think it's a strong defense of press freedom, of freedom of speech, freedom of the media. News 24 stood by Karyn, our senior legal reporter, from the beginning, and we're very happy that the High Court vindicated the arguments that we brought.
Joined in studio now by our senior political reporter, Ziyanda Ngcobo. She's been watching the story develop today and, of course, over the last few months, or Ziyanda is at the last few years. Good afternoon to you. There are all sorts of implications for this. I mean, One of the things that sort of was hanging on this application was whether or not the former president could take the current president, could claim that the current president, Cyril Ramaphosa, was a responsible and accessory after the fact. What happens to that private prosecution?
Well, basically, one can anticipate that will basically be rendered moot. That matter will be rendered moot because, remember, the president was considered an accessory after the fact to a crime, an alleged crime. And today's judgment has basically proven that there was no crime that was committed by advocate Billy Downer and Karyn Maughan. But also critical to both these matters, that of the judgment that was handed down today and the one of the current president, the private prosecution that's been brought against him, are those two nulli prosecuis, those certificates of non-prosecution. Now, the judgment today, the 68-page judgment, talks about these certificates and says in no way does this include Karyn Maughan, that she was always envisaged, as a witness and not a suspect. And so in that regard, it also cancels her out. And in the same vein, it does that with Billy Downer. Also equal to that, you'll know that President Cyril Ramaphosa has described the prosecution against him, the private prosecution against him by Zuma, as vexatious. And you'll know that Karyn Maughan and Billy Downer have also described it as an abuse of court process, which the court has also upheld. So very similar arguments coming from Downer and Maughan and President Cyril Ramaphosa. So we can anticipate that there will definitely be a knock-on effect. Not unless, of course, as already been indicated by the Jacob Zuma Foundation, that this matter will be appealed, and perhaps then, there will be some sort of waiting before the judgment is handed down in that matter.
Okay, there's an awful lot of things going on here.
Yes.
Was it the Jacob Zuma Foundation or the EFF a moment ago who seemed to be suggesting that there would be appeal? Mzunele Mani, I think, certain developments in his life. So all of this means that we could still have a lot more court action to come, which is something you could probably say about the Jacob Zuma matter for the next decade. Absolutely.
And I mean, it has implications still for the arms deal trial, because even in the court papers, Billy Downer argued that the reason why the former president is doing this is because he wants to have criminal charges instituted against him so that he removes him as the lead prosecutor in the arms deal matter. And you'll know that a case, criminal charges were also laid against Billy Downer by the former president at some some stage. So this is still all linking back to that arms deal trial. And now that we can anticipate this judgment being taken to the Supreme Court of Appeal, we can basically anticipate the can being further kicked down the road, because they're still arguing about whether or not Billy Downer is the rightful person to be prosecuting this matter. But it's still also critical, again, when we talk about the conduct of the former president, because the court said, and I'll quote, I think they said the respondent came to court with unclean hands. And this was in response to whether or not the former president has abused the courts, basically saying that it wasn't the first time that the former president has tried to institute something against Billy Downer, and therefore they have found, that his conduct is such that he may have had, shows that he had an ulterior purpose for this private prosecution.
Ziyanda Ngcobo, thank you very much indeed, a senior political reporter watching all of that. For more reaction, more legal analysis